Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast, where we talk to the thinkers and the makers inside of popular culture and the marketers that build their brand using today's zeitgeist as a power source for their fame. Yeah, I'm still Joe Cox, the pop marketer, and on today's show, we are talking with Mike Fallek, founder of Big Weasel, Little Weasel, content creator, podcaster, and documentary filmmaker, about his latest documentary, #Cult, and also his 2-year investigation into MGTOW. What is MGTOW? An anti-feminist, misogynistic online community advocating for men to actually separate themselves from women altogether, as well as from a society they believe has been corrupted by, well, you guessed it, feminism. Yeah, it's interesting. Mike is using untraditional methods of content creation with a goal to make cult education more approachable and also more engaging. He uses the same internet recruiting tools that these online cults do. But apart from his work on #Cult, Mike is just a storytelling pioneer. He's worked on documentaries, animation, and podcasts ranging from subjects like, the history of hamsters, told in stop motion, of course, sketches about fake dating apps, about people who walk loudly, and the guy even organizes a film festival that highlights creator content that doesn't quite fit into the traditional constraints of film and television, called the Like It Film Fest. His work can be found on Rizzle.tv, and I know you're going to find this conversation with Mike as eye-opening as I did as we explore the seedy underbelly of internet culture and the quickly evolving world of internet cults. And without any further ado, folks, Mike Fallek on the Pop Marketing Podcast. Let's go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast. I am Joe Cox, the Pop Marketer. And with us today, a treat. Someone new, Mike. Mike Fallek, how are you, man?
I'm good, Joe, and pop marketers, pop marketlies.
Pop marketers everywhere. And I found your project, #Cult, where you are investigating an internet cult named MGTOW. Is it MGTOW?
Yeah, that's how you say it.
But before we go down that rabbit hole of #Cult, I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit of your story as a creator and a bit more about the tools and mediums that you use to, paint your picture, make your art.
Yeah, I wanted to be a stand-up comic. I was a stand-up comic. In theory, I am a stand-up comic. I started doing that for a bunch of years and then went to film school and was doing both at once and kind of felt like I wanted to interact with people. I wanted to really like talk to people. I wanted to do crowd work. And there's a few comedians doing the type of crowd work that I like, but not really. It was this very intimate thing. And so it became podcasting instead. And then my stand-up kind of became my short films. Because if I didn't, my thinking was on stage, the audiences don't always want to interact, especially if they don't know they're there for it. So my thinking was if no one's going to interact in the way I need, well, then let's make it where they can interact. Let's make a film. And then we'll do podcasts where I'm intimately with 2 or 3 or 4 people and I can actually interact with them and play off of them and create something awesome. In terms of mediums, that's been a journey as well. I wanted to be a stand-up. So to me, that was writing and voiceover stuff in terms of film. But it's my opinion that you can't make films if you don't know how to edit. So then I learned how to edit, and then that became animation, and I had this knack for stop motion. And now it's this thing where I've realized as a filmmaker and I'm going to use the word artist to sound pretentious, you can't stop. You honestly cannot stop learning stuff. I just did this mini series that we're going to talk about today on Rizzle. It's done in 2D, 3D through Blender. That's not at all where I started. When I went to film school, I hated 3D because of the way it was taught. But it's now become this thing where it's actually harder to explain what I can't do than what I can do. There's so much that I just have to keep learning along the way. If I list all my mediums, people get like dizzy. I mean, but I'll list projects that have existed. Stop motion. I've made 2 documentaries that primarily use stop motion. One about the history of hamsters, which is speaking of cults. And it started as an MLM. The pet industry in this country started as a multi-level marketing scheme. It's 100% true. I can show you the book. We can grab it if we take a break. I own, essentially this guy, you can watch the film on Rizzle in one little chunks, but he, labs needed hamsters. They thought hamsters were the key to curing leprosy and all these other diseases. And
So unlike rats, there was some benefits to hamsters and making lots of them, right, for
there's
science.
this really interesting. I don't want to get too far afield, but it's fascinating that both my documentaries are wrapped up in vaccines. There was a search for a really long time for a cure for leprosy because it was believed only humans could get leprosy. And so all these animals get wrapped up into the world of labs, and that's kind of how we get pets in a lot of ways. The ones that we need more often became lab animals, and the scientists needed so many hamsters that it became worth it to breed them and outsource breeding them. And so, anyway, this guy. Albert Marsh started a business of multi-level marketing, and like I have the little pamphlet downstairs from the whatever it is, like 50s or 40s, like sell hamsters to your friends. So that was a stop motion documentary for kids. That was really good, and then we moved into live action stuff, and I've done commercials, hand drawn animated, digital animated, um, and it's become this thing where I hate, while we're talking about marketing, I hate when people say, "What's your brand?" Because, of course, that's an unrealistic thing to say to an artist, is that your brand, it shouldn't be anything. It should be everything, and getting people to understand that anything could come out of your studio, out of your hands, is more important than pigeonholing yourself, in my opinion. Even though some things.
Right, than having a thing that is like, "Oh, this is my style and my known for, and this is and now for the rest of my days, I'm just gonna make this thing."
Yeah.
Like, over and over
Especially
again.
since when you think about film school and you go, "Oh, that person went to film school, that person went to art school, that's so impressive." Well, it's been like, 6 years since I grad 6 or s I have really bad with time. It's been like 6 or 7 or 8 years since I graduated film school. Well, I could have gone to film school twice since then. So, like, when I was in film school, I wrote a comic book. A friend of mine drew it for me. Now, if you go to my Instagram, there's a really cool copying, sort of mimicking and making my own style of early 2000s comic book stuff there. I can learn stuff. It doesn't actually take that long to learn things. You're talking about a year or 2 years at school as you age. Like the idea that you're not incredibly proficient in something else a few years later is ridiculous too, you know?
And then technology does help, and I mean, let's go here because I think it's really important. So when you're talking about, "Hey, it makes people's heads spin," if I'm like start to draw out like, "Yeah, I'm an animator, a comedian, a podcaster, a this, a this, a this," it can make people be like, "Okay, which one are you, or which one do you specialize in?" Right? But I think I put this to kind of the current NFT Beeple boom too, right? Because people as a 3D artist that is no three he is not a 3D artist or wasn't trained in that. His big thing was like, okay, 100 days or 360 days, a year of just doing something every single day to pick up that new skill. But I kind of see that as this kind of new path to, hey, everyone's going to have to pick up new stuff, especially on our trek to the metaverse or whatever is next from 2D to 3D, right? So it's really interesting to me that you say, hey, it's kind of a known for me that it's not going to be a specialization into one place, but more of a jack of all trades and
I
consistently and
think it's part
constantly.
of me seeing the landscape when I went to film school. I had these
Right.
guys in their late 30s, early 40s, mid 50s, 60s being
Mhm.
like men and women being like, "Yeah, every a few years ago, every single piece of technology I worked with when I was your age is now considered officially outdated, and now they don't even sell it anymore." They stopped selling film. See, like film companies shut down, editing bays shut down. They don't make them anymore. So that partially did it for me. But also, when it comes to cults, if you see someone that's embracing like this is me, I'm this expert on this because I do that. That's sort of a path to being a but, like, like, thinking you're this expert and really being into yourself and saying, "I'm the this guy and I'm the authority on this," is not a great look a lot of times, and so more being able to understand everything and digging into your areas of knowing things is it's more important to say, "Here's what I know and here's how I can help," than it is to be like, "I know everything on this subject." Um But
Well, that's a lot less weight on the shoulders too, because I mean, if you know everything on the subject, or if that's what you're supposed to in a time when that's pretty hard, as you're saying, like, yeah, but why are we so fascinated with that though? Why are we I mean, it works, right? Like,
it works.
audiences
That's it
are
right there. You nailed it.
fascinated, and we seem to be almost, addicted to like, we need to hear it from the person who wrote a book about it, or from whatever that piece is. It's very effective.
I
Do you
I
find that
I say
in
this
the work
about
that you do too?
Yeah, I say this about the cult work, as we get more specifically into it, but the thing that I've noticed is so many people have less credentials than me on cults, and I don't have any. Like, it would be laughable if somebody came to me and said, "You're a cult expert." Be like, "No, I wrote down what cult experts say. I am not a cult expert." But I see people then being like, "Well, now I'm gonna be a coach, and I'm gonna be this person, and I'm gonna be this expert." And it's like, like you said, it works. And the phrase that we always use on hashtag cult, which is kind of an internet cult and kind of internet cult's a good way to say it, but they're really a phenomenon. It's a word I invented. I'm willing to say that narcissistic thing. I invented the word, which is a phenomenon now. You see people use the word. You see people use the word hashtag cult because it does exist. It works on people. It works to say to people like, I'm the expert on your life and you need to listen to me because people are looking for answers. That's what I've learned from doing all this stuff. It try lying. Try lying and see if lie about an accomplishment and see how good it feels. It feels good. That attraction, that expertise, that knowledge. Cults are evolution, is what we say in the podcast. They are not always. They are most of the times, from what I've heard, not. Someone sets out and makes this cult. We talk about this on the show and the series, which is on Rizzle. It's called hashtag cult. You can find it there. Um, People they evolve, they are abused and then they become abusers or they want to abuse people and they evolve by doing what makes them feel good in this damaged way, or they're being coerced and they evolve because there's stimuli and negative and positive stimuli that are manipulating them because the abuser has evolved. So the idea of setting out to do something, the idea of being an expert, the idea of all those things, it really is more about evolution. So if someone's coming to you and saying I'm is giving you a sales pitch, they're trying that out on everybody. They're seeing what works. And if you've landed on, I should say, I'm the big authority on this and I'm the expert and I'm the be all end all, that's someone to watch out for. That's someone who's landed on the conclusion that they need to say, I'm the big time expert. And that's a scary place to land. Um,
Well, there's some intent behind that, right? Like, there's intent if you're saying that, maybe some kind of intention of why they are so concerned with them being the absolute be end all be all. So let's talk about hashtag cult. Let's get into it. I found hashtag cult on Rizzle and barely even know, it was one of those, what part of the internet am I on now, right? Which is my favorite. It's my favorite pastime. Let's talk about hashtag cult. Where did it come from, and what drew you to storytelling in a way through like Rizzle?
Okay, so let's start with the project itself. The group is extant for many years. I had a friend who'd been sucked up in this. I'd had this thing brush against me in my life. I'd had someone who had been sucked into my partner was sucked into an abusive relationship through the internet. Um, I knew people in these things, and putting a word to it didn't really connect. And then as I started to talk to my friend and all these different people, the word cult kept coming up as and brainwashing kept coming up. And so I said, "Can I release this intervention with this friend that I've given up on?" Which is important to say. I'm not a hero. I gave up on this person. I chose to take care of my loving girlfriend who was a part of this abusive thing, but you can't take care of everyone. And I've given up on this other person who was my friend for years and got sucked up into MGTOW. And I kept using the word brainwashing because that's what was going on. He had confirmation bias, which is the idea that you find the facts you want in the world around you. And I knew that as a part of brainwashing. And I said, "Can I prove that this is a cult? What is a cult? Can I prove that this is a cult?" And I'd watched every cult documentary under the sun, and I didn't actually know what it took to go from what is this, I see this behavior happening, what is a cult? And that became our journey. We released the intervention, and I had this attitude of being a good journalist, which was that this group exists on the internet. These groups exist on the internet. We call them red pill cults. And they all believe that women are genetically inferior to, or genetically superior in some cases of MGTOW, and they're genetically designed to destroy men, take their money, rule society. They co opted feminism essentially into an idea that helps their worldview and their cult. But no one, and you hear about these groups, incel, red pill, MGTOW, you hear about them, but they're sort of all lumped together. And I thought that that was, from looking at the landscape, well, it was nonsense. From looking at the landscape, there was infighting. They thought other things were stupid. They thought all these other things. And I was going to be a good journalist and not say, I'm going to put my wall up and yell at these guys. I'm going to say, come on my show. And I was very nice. I gave them a soft place to land and said, look, I hear what you're saying. Why don't you be a guest? We got current members, ex members of these groups all coming out of the woodworks, because one of the ways the group works is if you label something, even if it's negative, especially if it's negative, if you label something as MGTOW, red pill, or whatever, the forum comments will be boom, 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 them. And of course, YouTube and all these other algorithms encourage more comments. So they find each other through what a phenomenon I called is a
Right.
hashtag cult. You need not have an organization, which they don't have. You can say everybody's always worried about cult organizations and saying something negative. No, there's no one to sue you. They refuse to admit they're an organization, which is part of how they hide. And so MGTOW believes, men going their own way, believes you shouldn't marry women, you shouldn't live with women, and you shouldn't sleep with women, and you shouldn't touch yourself, and a whole other laundry list of things. And they're their own group. And if you criticize that, your comments section becomes a forum for them to indoctrinate, bolster themselves, let out aggression, push out outsiders. And this phenomenon we were seeing, I was also seeing the public dealing with it badly. The public would get angry and they would say, how dare you say these things? And this is the analogy I want to use to explain how I view the public's reaction to incel, which is its own group. I made that mistake of grouping them all together. And Red Pill, which is its own group, and MGTOW, which is its own group, and Pickup Artists, which are their own group. Here's the public's reaction. Let's take the group I'm investigating, MGTOW. They say something ridiculous, like a eugenic idea that women are trying to steal men's sperm and get all the benefit from it to have a baby. We're all normal. We know that's crazy. We don't need to prove it. It's kind of like, and when you go on the internet yelling at these people, you're also trying to prove something to yourself. And the analogy or the metaphor I see is like, you're at this party, Joe, it's you there. You've got your stylish, outfit and your glasses that are cool, and I'm there, and I'm not. I'm dressed less like this and more like a cool hippie artist. My clothes are disheveled, but it looks on purpose. And we're drinking whiskey and wine, no beer, no koozies or cozies. I say cozies, but now I'm in the Midwest. Apparently, everybody calls it koozie.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't even know cozy, but I'm kind of part. I kind of like cozy. It's
I'm
cozy.
isolated from the world. So we're all there. We're all, there's a fire roaring. There's a light jazz record on. And someone comes over in a leather jacket and they go, oh, you won't believe the argument I've had with the person in the corner. Oh, the ignorance of her. I can't believe it. Look at her over there. And you look over and it's a 3-year-old child playing with blocks. Like, you're having an argument with someone. If you're going online and trying to prove to somebody you're stupid for saying you shouldn't live with women because they'll accuse you of sexual assault, duh, they're stupid. What are you trying? They're in a cult. What are you trying to prove to yourself by having this argument? And so I actually attracted a lot of these people to come on the project. And because I said, I care about what you're saying. It sounds like you're in distress. I'd love to talk to you. I'm happy to hear you out. And accidentally, we were told by cult experts, you did like the perfect thing. I just thought of it as, well, why would I yell at them? I want to talk to them. They are in pain. I know what it's like to be in a cult or an abusive relationship. Said, they told us, you did exactly what works for them, because a lot of people in cults just want to be heard. And especially something where there's a lot of yelling and a lot of aggression, they don't feel heard. And so by saying to them, I want to hear you, you're appealing to a reason they want to be in this cult. And the internet appeals to them. Comment sections appeal to people who want to yell. And guess what else appeals to cults? You yelling back at them, because that makes them feel like, of course they're yelling at me. I've got the answer to the world. They're afraid of my answer. So this became this rolling project, and we talked about the meta. If I'm going on too long, by the way, just stop me.
No, this is great, and the only part that I really was thinking of while you were talking through that is it just feels this is very specific. I love hashtag cult because it feels very what I didn't get is the decentralized part of it, which is not it's many organizations, non-organizations, all the way from anonymous or whatever, but drawn to different conversations just by way of algorithms or search to be able to organize around things versus again having to have a like a entity that keeps everybody in touch, right? That's very internet only, right? Like
Yeah, and part of that is the ease of the
right,
technology, right?
exactly.
Like, we someone asked us, "Well, what happens if this thing, what will somebody come and do this?" It's like, "No, they won't," because there's no ease to that. They want to be able to easily get out the aggression. So the easier the technology is, the less monitoring there is, which most comment
Ah,
sections on videos, you have to go in and find the comment and report it. And usually that report first goes to the moderator. Sometimes you can click to get the report of a comment to go to the big entity at large. But if there's no moderation, which you talked about as well, unmoderated forums are always trouble.
mhm.
We talk about it in the podcast. MSN Messenger said they had to shut down a lot of their forums because like there's nobody moderating them, and they always become pedophile rings. So that was their report. They said we cannot have these forums because they're just becoming crime centrals. Um, and the easier it is to just go on. Back in the day, when you were in a fragile situation and you wanted some answers to the world, you were then susceptible to be dropped into a cult. And should you come across it, that's one of the ways people could get into a cult. You come across someone who says, "This thing is the answer, come with me, we'll get on the spaceship behind the comet."
Well, and it's a good place to fish if you are a cult, is in places where people are kind of broke, right? Like, if get them at the bottom and that's a good recruiting, spot.
Now you don't need to. You indoctrinate yourself, which is really why I think MGTOW has caught on. I'm upset about a breakup. I pull out my phone, bing, why do girls break up with me? Well, then you get into the world of people making these big statements about why women do X and why women do Y. They're all horrible, but you have no answers. One kid we talked to said he's in his 20s now. He said, "I was, 17-year-old kid. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about relationships. I'd had two." I don't know why this happened, and you see these older guys doing it, but there's a million reasons people get into cults. But now you indoctrinate yourself. You pick up your phone, click, there it is. I search it, and so the algorithms help with that. They help get them, you know, uh, less about like the algorithm pushes a cult, which I don't think it does, but more that you don't have to wait until someone approaches you. You don't have to wait until someone who's an abuser and a coercer targets you. You do it yourself. You find the answers you want. You find your own confirmation bias, and you find a place that says, the reason they did. We talked to a guy named Tom. He's a big feature on the podcast. Tom's had a rough life. And so when an organization said to him, Tom has lived in group homes and in charity organization and women's shelters. His dad isn't in the picture. The mom is trying to provide for all these kids in poverty. And so when an organization says the reason women get into these situations is because they're trying to steal money from the men and that's their motivation, well, that's exactly what I thought because it works for my whole problems in life.
Right. Yeah, my narrative, this is great for my narrative, so it becomes part of it, attached to it, right? Like, that's humans, like, we're really good at attaching those things to the narratives that we already believe, right? Like, and this puts it on, it's like rocket fuel for it, right?
But what I wanted to know above that was making narratives for me as a cult outsider, someone who's not a psychologist, just a journalist, someone who's had brush-ins with cults, but is trying to take care of someone who's been in a coercive and cultic relationship, lost someone to this, was yeah, the narrative, we're all Sherlock Holmes, right? Ah, yes. And your motivation, Dr. House, was to use the cane to because you were angry at your mother, but really you don't know how it works. You don't know there was no narrative for a lot of the stuff. Maybe there's a slight narrative. what were these guys doing? What were these, in this case, guys doing to get these people into their organization? How does it work? So the whole journey has been meta in that I wanted to put out there, look, I think you're a cult. I'll put this out on the internet and let's see who will say you're a cult and who won't. And we got Dr. Drew and we got Rachel Bernstein and we got Chris Shelton and Hoyt Richards and Mika Spielberg, all these big people who were involved in both sex on the internet and cults. And
Yeah, and it resonated with them, I assume, like, you didn't have that in your vision that you'd be talking to Dr. Drew maybe on day 1, right?
no,
But it seemed to fit in
or
really
Rick
well.
Ross, the father of cult studies in the world. I didn't
Yeah,
think
that's
that I
not
would, but they all were. I was so worried that all of them would be like, no, this is what makes a cult, and that's what makes a cult. And it became clear that what we don't have in this world is an actual conversation about safety around abuse. We only like to talk about abuse and coercion and all and cults and things like that when it's a juicy story. But you see nonsense campaigns taking off for, mental health awareness. Okay, you show me a mental health awareness campaign that actually lists things we can do about mental health awareness, and I'll give you, I don't know, I'll give you a signed piece of art. I just realized someone might actually find it, but they're just saying, oh, mental health awareness because it's easy. We know why kids become bullies. They have a bad situation at home or they were bullied. We know why people abuse. They were abused. They're trying to abuse more people, or they've become addicted to abusing. But yet, the conversations we have about this stuff, we have about cults, are always so exploitative. And so, part of it was making it humorous so that people would have approachability to it. And part of it was actually, what is a cult? When I made the hamster movie, I would always ask certain questions about, hamsters that would trip people up, and like, should two hamsters live together? I've been addicted to these sort of educational things that everybody thinks they know. The answer is objectively no. Two hamsters should not live together. Um, Here's the one I'll ask everyone with this one: what is a cult? Do people know what a cult is? And people answer wrong all the time, and yet the experts give the same answer every single time. So it became more of a thing of like, how do we teach people about cults? And part of working with Rizzle for my series on it was they were very into what we were doing. And they also resonated with the no comments thing, which was to say, we have this app where you have to put your face on screen to comment. And that really does cut down on the hate. It truly does make it a harder place. You have to do a secondary activity. You have to show your face to have hate back at someone. Um, and that was part of the appeal. And the other part of the appeal was we hadn't done anything vertical. We had released everything horizontal, and we had done nothing vertical, which is huge. And I think we did a really cool job with the vertical stuff.
Yeah, I that's the one thing that stands out is the future of storytelling as it sits in your hand in vertical, right? And the differences in building a message for that versus building it in traditional film. So I'll take a step back, I guess, a little bit on that is that makes sense with Rizzle on the comments specifically, right? Like, hey, cool. This is going to be when we get into hashtag cult, one big use case of these of everybody that's indoctrinated or inside there is utilizing. I'm sure they'll find you a piece of content out there that has MGTOW or whatever, red pill, wherever it is, and then they'll attack that spot. So taking that out of the picture makes total sense. What about the short form nature of it as well? Like, what did you start running into? Did you enjoy kind of that, or was uh, I guess the question would be this: in NYU film school, did they prepare you in any way for kind of those? Was it more about the basics, or was it and why you tell how you tell a story and why and all that, or did you get or were you butting up against more traditional filmmaking and documentary styles, or and have you been tried to play jazz more?
NYU is the school of, and I should say specific people. Lynn McVeigh and Dean Leonard. These are people that I really looked up to at NYU and kind of taught me what I was doing. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some, Rob Morton is another guy that like shaped me. That because when you go to film school, the myth is that there's an entity and all these different things. Every artistic situation, my original vision was not to go to film school at all because I was getting a lot of out of these shoots and things I was doing on my own. But that school is more about, not in an artsy fartsy way, but more about what can you do as it's to not focus as much on commercial. There are lots of commercial classes there. There are also butts. I actually they call me for donations every year, and I'm like, I send you guys stories for the alumni magazine all the time. So if you want me to donate, but so I don't like giving press to the school itself, but I'll give press to Dean and Rob and Lynn McVeigh. It's more about how do you make something and how do you get what's in your head out on the page and out on the screen. Um, so I think that that's a better technique than teaching me how to prepare for everything in the marketplace right now, because you look at filmmaking as a puzzle. At least I did, and a thing that can be wrapped in a certain way and use storytelling in a certain way. To me, it's short form, but you've got to look at there's 26 episodes, so you have 26 minutes in theory to tell your story. But at the end of each episode, you have to wrap it up. So what it became was, what are 26 things I want to tell people about this cult? And what are 26 messages that you can get out of each individual video? And then what is one or two or five messages you can get out of watching the whole thing? But not making it an instance where I put for free on my Rizzle account my documentaries that are feature length, because then you can watch them all and get into the series. That's the only place to watch them free, is in the 1 minute segments. But if if you count on people, how many TikToks do you watch the whole series of? How many Rizzles do you watch the whole series of? Very few. So if we could get the people that, right now I think we have about,
Right.
as far as I can tell, a couple thousand people watching every single one as it comes out, and then another couple thousand people watching just as they come out on their own. I'm basing that kind of on intuition and kind of like the stats, but you've got to hit those people that only watch it once, that are sent the clip.
Yeah.
You've got to make this something where someone's in the cult and you say, oh, this thing, or someone who knows an abusive situation and goes, mom, dad, friend, someone's, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, here's this explains what I went through. And so it became a thing of like, about half the episodes were going to be MGTOW specific. About another half were going to be specific to cults. And then only about 5 or 6 were going to be about this investigation and the meta of, we release stuff and it becomes part of the story. Um, you know, there's the one episode I think I regret the most that isn't as powerful as the actual thing, is we talk about a cartoon we produced, which was like a PSA done in stop motion. And Dr. Drew actually mentioned it on his show as well after we were on as guests. Um, After me and Paulina were on his show as guests, he mentioned it. He said everyone liked the idea that this 6-minute film was funny and told people about cults, but we focused less on it on the Rizzle side, and it just kind of made you aware of the project in general. Um, and now we're having a reaction thing to it. When my series came out, I was uh, approached by a group wanting to ban MGTOW from Reddit. And now they're going to be a part of the documentary itself. And so it keeps moving forward in that way. The intervention becomes the responses in the comment section, which were a lot. We had one video, I always list the stat: 100 views, 300 comments. Because all
Hmm.
about taking out aggression. The commenter becomes a guest. That is posted. Someone wants to see more about the guest. Someone approaches us. Oh, this guest spoke to me. Then they're part of it, and that's all documented in this film coming out. And so we kind of have a rolling finish, and we're approaching the finish line of shooting, but it of course will never finish because this group is out there.
I mean, so much awesome. My mind is just catching up. But here's the thought. It's just this new art form of, I love the idea of, hey, I structured the idea, I had the idea, and we found a medium that really worked for the idea instead of the other way around, right? Like, instead of having the tactic or learning the tactic in film school or whatever, and then pushing everything through that medium. And I love the idea of, hey, here's how I had to design that. I thought of it more of, instead of one pieces, we had to design a 26-minute piece and then figure out the issues of, okay, people are not watching this, consuming it the way we would hope they would necessarily. So I have to design it for somebody who's catching one piece and somebody who's catching it and then getting them hooked into the rest of them, and then somebody that just hits one, right? Like, totally get that. And I think those are all kinds of different skills that anyone, any content creator is going to have to deal with. I think the big one, though, is this idea of the never ending project or the rolling project, right? It's when, as I'm putting this together, I'm like, oh, yeah. So the actual feature you're working on now, but the rest of it was, can I start getting interest in this to A, get people to understand, hey, this is something of interest. It might be an idea you might not have, but now Dr. Drew's involved. These people are involved, and I can utilize my audience to become part of it. I can use the podcaster that's interviewing me, which like right here, to be part of these bigger this bigger story that is being told. Is that not cool? Like, I mean, it's
It's
kind
really
of mind bending, but it really kind of starts to get to the heart of content creation now, versus like the superpowers of it, being connected.
it was this thing that was inspired by my film before this called Telephone Dieting, where we did a lot of fun. Speaking of marketing, the most fun thing in that film, which you can watch for free on Rizzle and Chunks, is I got influencers to come in and interview for selling and being influencers for plastic bags of air that I said were marketable and valuable for your nutrition. I said I was a nutritionist, which anyone can say they are.
Oh, wow.
And but on the other side of it, we did these interviews with dietitians who are real certified experts and go to school for it. And I cut all this stuff out and I just said to myself, this is such valuable diet information. It doesn't fit my narrative of diet being worse for our minds than it really is for our body and all these different things that affect food. But why can't this info be out there? And it was sort of like these cults are utilizing media in ways through evolution accidentally that are genius. One of which is targeting a bunch of people who need to scapegoat their aggression and want to comment all the time, and letting them be egged on by people from the outside and encouraging them to debate and fight with each other and yell at people when they get things wrong. That's creating tons of comments on their videos and tons of forums and sharing the links between each other and saying you're having a philosophical debate.
And that engagement is giving them skyrocketing them in algorithms and everything else because the computer doesn't realize, hey, this is all
MGTOW
angry.
has more SEO power than mental health as a
Yeah,
hashtag.
that's a problem. Right.
That's a
And
problem.
it's a
Stopping a
weaponization.
cult is
Mhm,
less powerful than cults.
mhm.
So they utilized it in a way that they didn't know. Posting constantly. When you want to be heard and you post constantly, you don't care about the content, and there exists an audience. Like there exists people wanting to be in this stuff. Well, why would you not put stuff out there? And they dominate. They dominate. Search MGTOW on the podcast app. We're up there, thank goodness, as one of the things you get. But you get 10 other podcasts that do it. You don't get thousands of them like on YouTube because podcasting is harder than YouTube. The ease of it is a big part of it. The easier your app is to use, the more you're going to have people engaging on this hashtag stuff, the less culpability that you have for saying something. In other words, it's not your channel. You can just comment something and you can't get kicked off of most sites for commenting. It's evolution. It's not that someone figured all this out, which is the thing I would say to people in the creative world. Don't try and figure stuff out so much, because the more you try, what I've learned from this group as a creator is they weren't trying to figure any of this out. They just started yelling at the world, and that worked because of what the algorithm told them, and because of cultic incentives and things like that. But they just started doing stuff. And that's what I did too. I just put out this intervention and it became a whole project. The more you try and figure the system out, the more you're kind of like a cult leader. You know what I mean? These are massive organizations
Mm.
that have everything. And you can be someone like Joe and have a business and figure out how you can help people and what you know. But if you sit around all day planning and you're not going to release it, or you want to do it this way and do it with this person, do it with that person, we have this problem with the academics. And I say to them, why don't you publish something every day? This group is publishing, cults are now publishing things at a massive speed, especially hashtag cults. And you put out an article every other year or something. Your blog needs to be more active. And they would say to them, like, there's the obvious, which is that they're culpable for what they say. They're not selling lies. But then there's the other part
Exactly.
of it, which is like they have a real job. They are doing this work they're doing triage. Essentially, these doctors all said to me, these people, I'm trying to fix people. I don't have time to be preemptive. And I felt that that was a place that our group could actually be preemptive, actually do the work that these people can't do every day, post lots of content about, I hate the word content, but it's the only thing that describes it. Post lots of content that reaches people before, not doing stuff when someone's dead, like incels have killed people, when someone's dead, like MGTOWs have killed people, when someone's dead, like red pill people have killed people, when someone's dead, like, porn addiction people do, no fat people have done. Stop writing then. Do include that as well, because MGTOW has hid in plain sight for years, but create documentaries and fun documentaries. Joe, the bad guys are having a ball. The bad guys are really having fun on the internet because they can hurt anyone. They don't care whose feelings get hurt, and they can say whatever they want because there's no culpability. So we have to make the good stuff fun too. We have to make the education fun too. Otherwise, it's always going to, who wants to click on it? You know these types of intellectual posts and stuff. I'm sure you do. Who wants to watch that? Who wants to go to school again? Not me. I want to have fun on the internet. I want to watch something funny. So we made it cartoons. We worked with tons of comedians, and it made it like a fun thing to talk about. The only beef I've had with comedians is sometimes they get too serious when you ask them stuff like this. They don't want to make jokes. If you're a comic, you can say your political thing and do it in a funny way. And that's the trend that I would say is the most important thing I've learned from this that will be helpful to your audience is if you're a comedian, if your vibe is funny, don't think that you can't talk about something serious and be funny, because the people that are doing damage to your cause or your brand, they're saying horrible stuff and they're funny to their audience of other horrible people. So if you're not having fun when you should be having fun, you're going to lose every time. Because if the bad guys are more fun, there's lots of people that don't have the education on it, and they're just going to go to the bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to fight it is to start to pour into the bucket of, hey, we need to start utilizing the methods in which they have almost to a point not perfected, but it's scary because it is all hidden in plain sight. And you said it right there. It's scary because it's all there, and the MGTOW and the red pill, all of it is there, and I can get on right now and find any of it. It's not, there's no hiding on any of that, but there's just so much stuff out there now. You're just not seeing it. You don't know what it is. There's too much stuff to keep up with, so you don't realize it's even a thing until it's too late.
One of the things of cults is secrecy. It's always a thing, is secrecy. And I talked with Sarah Steele from Let's Talk About Sects, and she was like, "Well, is it secret?" And I said, "Yeah, it's of course it's secret." "Well, how is it secret? Are you on their website right now?" I mean, are you looking at their sites every day? Of course it's secret because they know how to push you away. You don't want to go in. And the level of indoctrination is also one-on-one and self. So one of the things that's great about it is in terms great in terms of making a cult, is not great in terms of everyone else, is the comment section is really important because everyone's texting. And you have to go to the next level of indoctrination to start filming yourself. A lot of them do it anonymously as well. They don't show their faces. One of the leaders that we talked to who reached out to us, and so then I said, "We'll talk to you." I believe he only started showing his face again because I said he couldn't prove he was the person. This was Peter Nolan, who was he's a famous internet abuser, and I said I don't think you. I don't. I said in my video I don't know if he's the real guy because he doesn't show his face, and I think that kind of egged him to show his face. But they like being anonymous. They like the ease of it, and the secrecy is also, well, you don't know what I'm. You don't look at my history. Sure, I'm sitting next to you, and you think that we just disagree on some stuff in life, and I've been more ornery. The internet, I'm talking about all this other stuff, and it's it's levels of indoctrination too, because there's we talked to a pickup artist and said you kind of start at, and MGTOW said this too, you started having a problem with girls and you read about dating stuff, and then that dating stuff, as soon as it gets taken seriously and it's not like fun Sex in the City type, writing about the hardness of dating and like all that cool stuff, Bridget Jones and fun comedies, it then turns into, well, seriously, this is how you date. And that turns into somebody who likes control, who wants to tell you they're smarter than you. And then you get into pickup artists who use genetics and eugenics again to say, this is what women are thinking, and this is how you control them in some way. And then that doesn't work because it's nonsense. And so then you turn to the world of red pill and incel, and there's other people to pick you up from there. And there's this level of indoctrination leading down different paths. And it's hidden in plain sight because you don't have the interest, but it's out there totally. And then the only people that get the interest, they make it worse. If you're yelling at these people on the internet, they are going to. Chris Shelton said, who was in Scientology for I think like 20 years or something crazy. He said every time someone protested outside Big Blue, every time someone stopped us, he said that. He said every time I wanted to go back in. Wanted to go back in. I felt more safe here. Rachel Bernstein said, if you're telling people there's no war and there's a war in their mind, they put up their armor. People who think they're in a war have armor up. That's it right there. And I had talked to this one guy and I felt we were making a connection, and then boom, he was resisted against me. He's like, well, the person feels scared. You're not, again, you're yelling at the 3-year-old in the corner. I think it's somewhat cruel to make fun of these people because they are not in their right mind. And there's these great moments where psychologists will be interviewed about someone who does something horrible. And they go, well, how can you say this person is crazy? They did this and that and that. And like, well, they are crazy. Listen to what you just said. They're crazy. Um, I think that's the big thing I want to push on every show is don't try and fight this thing by fighting. That's what they're doing. You want to try and fight. And some of them are turning into abusers. A lot of them are writing stuff on the internet that is harmful and scary and abuse already at that point. But by yelling at them, we know they're wrong. And that was part of it too, was like Rizzle was an opportunity. It was like if someone did come on and wanted to say this stuff, which they won't, I would be happy to talk to them and diffuse the situation. SEO wise, nothing is better for you than starting a hashtag cult. There is no disbenefit to being a MGTOW creator right now, which is terrible. There's no, despite Chris Hassan, who was arrested and was a MGTOW, despite the suspect in the Salas killings in New Jersey was a MGTOW, despite all these things of MGTOW, there's no disbenefit of labeling yourself that. There's none. Same with, you think incels are right? Same with incels. Hate on the internet boosts you in the algorithm. There's no reason not to do it in terms of SEO. And so we had to be a message to be like, there's a better way and we need to fight against these things. Moderate your comment section. That's it. Even moderate your comment section is like, is so key. Even if you think you're doing good, okay, if you're doing good, moderate your comment section, take down things that are blatantly hateful. Don't say it's a forum about debate, and take stuff out. It's that simple of a step, is to not just let comments go out there. Or a good comment, in my opinion, is not someone says something negative and all your fans back you up.
Right.
That's a cult itself. We are going to yell at anyone that disagrees and get out of here and whatever. The answer is take it down. Be responsible despite the implications of getting more hits, because there's just as much bad stuff coming from love. I think a lot of influencers are not, resisting more harm. Although we like to talk about cults and abusive groups, a lot more harm in this world comes from people who think they're in love with you, people who want to love you. Stalking is out of control in this country. And so if you're an influencer and every time anyone says something, you just encourage it to love you and whatever, and you don't take down the stuff that's like, that's a little bit too much love, or someone says your channel saved my life. Hey,
Yeah.
no, it didn't. Like it probably did not if you're making videos about cats. Well, cats are important though. But
Right. But as a creator, like that's kind of it hits that dopamine center of like, okay, that's right. And more people should catch my stuff too, because it changed this person's life. Right. But it's tough. Man, there's so much great, and you're doing so much. I really hats off to like. I think the message is so incredibly we're so behind on understanding not only the need for cult education, but I think this goes right into just media literacy in general, right? Like we have another generation. We have not, my generation has not done the best job, as you can see throughout 2020, of being able to handle ourselves within the internet or be able to not give in to this ability of judging somebody else by a post and then getting in a heated back and forth, right? Like 2020 was the year of just everybody wiping their friend list, from different places.
Good.
Like
Good. But by the way, if you can't resist, I say this all the
then,
time.
yep,
Block them, stop them, get them out of your life. Who
that's what
cares?
it's
Because
there for. That's what it's there for.
that's
If you
nonsense. You
can,
don't
yep.
need to talk to
And it's
people.
okay to that you are unable to handle that too. But you do have to keep on to the internet. And that is my question too, is like, what does a lot with all these places out here, what are the skill sets that you see talking to professionals and people that are in this world? What is the best defense for not only falling into a cult, but keeping yourself well and still living on the internet? Which, I mean, it's dumb to think that the generation coming up is not going to be tasked with more becoming on the internet. As we move towards the conversion of a lot of different things, it's going to become easier to create on there. It's going to be some really great stuff. But to say that, hey, everybody should just get outside more, and it maybe is not as realistic. These are the
No,
tools that
it's
these
insane.
they're gonna
It's
people are
insane
gonna
because
use.
our
So
whole project I'm so glad you said that because our whole project was I started this before the pandemic. The fact that it takes place on the pandemic is the reason that it takes place only on the internet is the reason it was able to keep going.
yeah,
It's a coincidence. It's not a project I made out of the pandemic. I've been working remotely for years. Most of my animation jobs come from the internet. People being on the internet has definitely helped more than hurt my career. But let's take apart one thing at a time. I did all of this on the internet, so the idea to get outside more is ridiculous. Also, I don't have to wanna be that's your hobby, okay? I don't have to wanna be outside. "Oh, let's go sit and relax. What do you wanna do? Watch a movie? No, let's go outside and look at grass." It's not an answer to anything, and it's something that's been said for a while, and part of this was we did this all on the internet. Every expert, every nice person, they were all on the internet. Um, but I'll say this, the more important answer to your question is what what can people do? Beware of anyone that answers that question. I'm not going to answer that question because the reason is beware of anyone that has answers to you. I know that sounds insane because that's what the internet's for. No, you should have your guard up when someone says, I have the answer. You should have your guard up right away because you answer those questions and I go, ask Rachel Bernstein, ask a doctor. I don't know. But I'd say the only advice I can give is beware of someone who asks and tells you what to do. We were going to talk about mud. I know we're running low on time, but I talked to Richard Bartle and he actually has a really interesting perspective on this. I would recommend people read his books. They're long, but it's called Designing. The one that I read to interview him about was called Designing Virtual Worlds. I read a few other snippets of other ones that he wrote. But Richard Bartle invented online gaming in the 70s. And
which is nuts to even think about. Like,
he
right?
not
Yeah.
yeah, you can watch that documentary on Rizzle too. He not only invented online gaming, Joe, he invents gaming culture. He invents gaming tournaments all in the 70s. Like it's crazy to think everything that he did in 1970. They were having within the first year of inventing online gaming, tournaments, cultures, forums. It was nuts. Um, but when I interviewed him, I pushed him. I said, "Why is Facebook not a virtual world? People lie about who they are." And it took a while to get him for me to understand this. And he said, you can be anything in a virtual world, right? You can come in and say, "I'm a dragon," but the only value it has is in that world, in saying you're a dragon. When you're on Facebook, you represent yourself as a real person, even if it's a fake real person. You're trying to convince the world that you're a real person. It's not virtual. It's not no stakes. Um, and that was it took a while in interviewing him. I was very nervous about interviewing him. I read a lot for like a month straight just to be there. But he's so accessible, and that's why I would read the book. And one of the things that I want to push is he talks about this incident called a rape in cyberspace with this character who, in a virtual world, attacks someone. They attack someone in the virtual world, and it talks about whether or not this was a sexual assault because it happened um, in a virtual world. And his whole message, and the point that when reading it over and over again, got me to understand like what he meant by representing yourself as a real person is his whole message in the end is a virtual world should be a place where, yeah, you kill people right online in a virtual world, but it doesn't affect you. A virtual world should be a perfect world where nothing hurts you. So the goal isn't don't worry. The goal isn't to say, don't dismiss it because someone wrote this, graphic content at you on the internet. It's to say the ideal over time is to create a world where that doesn't affect you in a virtual world. Facebook, no matter who you are, social media, no matter who you are, no one believes, even if it's a parody account, no one believes that the fictional character is actually doing it. They believe it's a real person. And so the advice I'd give is to look at the fact that these are real stakes. There's always real stakes involved. Even if there's this annoying thing that people will say, like, I'm a real person on this end of this. Like, yeah, I know you're a real person. And that's the thing is you always know people are real people, but there's stakes involved. If you say something, there are stakes involved in saying that thing. It isn't a virtual world where I shot someone in the head in a video game not 3 hours before we spoke. I am not feeling the guilt or horror that I would feel in real life. That's what a virtual world can do. In these social media networks, we are all representing ourselves as real people. And it took a while to swallow that pill because I really wanted him to say Facebook was a virtual world. It would have been a great soundbite, but he was right. He's right. He's right that it's not a virtual world at all. There are real stakes to everything you say.
And the medium is the message, so it's kind of the idea is, yes, just the idea and the structure of Facebook on the non-anonymity, the fact that you are human and represent yourself, which was a design choice on their end, right? Like, became that design choice, becomes part of that. And he also is kinda saying the only way to take away the effectiveness that online cults are doing is by taking any kind of the effect that they're having emotionally, right? When these things are said, is he also saying, hey, if I take this stuff out, if you take it out, then it doesn't, they can't use it. They can't weaponize it anymore. Not that you're going to take comments out, but you're going to, it's like comedy. It's like comedy in general.
I'll be clear here. I am fully in favor of getting rid of comments. I don't think any harm would come from it. I think that
Where is the place this lives the most online in places you wouldn't think, right? Like, what are the culprits?
YouTube and Reddit is at least a little bit more compliant, but the group that approached me wants to get rid of it on Reddit. YouTube, though, if you look at the mise en scène of YouTube, where what a designer would call the page of YouTube, you have I pointed this out on our podcast. We pointed it out on Dr. Drew. Look at a YouTube page. 40% video,
Yep.
60% comments. That is by design. Like you said, it's by choice. And so the emphasis is on comments. There are, like on Rizzle, like with creators I know, like ASMR Kitten and people that I have worked with, they have, oh man, the ASMR community, I can't talk about it enough. Supportive, nice, moderated comments. They always get a moderator. If you're a big YouTube person or you're a big company right now, get a moderator. Get someone on there to moderate this stuff. At the very least, I don't think there's a problem getting rid of comments. I think apps like Rizzle do have you hear about feud wars going on TikTok and YouTube and all these different things. Why? There's a comment section, in my opinion. There's the videos, but there's an actual comment section to kind of get engagement up during a fight because people love gladiator fights and we've got to give them bread and killings every day, right? So it's like, if you get rid of the comment section, I literally think there would be no problem. I know I'm on the extreme end of that because I'm working with this group, but I think that what the question in here is, how can we be safe? And if a comment section is always representing a real person and a real idea in the world, even if it's from if you say you're Steve instead of Joe and write all women are evil, whether it's Steve or Joe, someone out there saying all women are evil. I think that you hear about less flare wars on Snapchat because you have to respond with a photo. You hear about less people fighting with each other on Snapchat, even if that's anecdotal. I'd say that's something to look at. We're not seeing it on Rizzle. We're not seeing people, you know, having these weird things because you have to. There is no secrecy. You have to say. There's no anonymity. You have to say it out loud. Even if you now, like secretly, Joe, after this, become a MGTOW creator. Well, people are outside the room and people are in your life. And what if someone comes in and hears you talking about it? There's more of a risk. You can't do it while you're at the bank. You can't do any of this stuff. There's the only way to make this stuff safe is not to change the internet, but is to be on top of what you can expect in this world from people who want to coerce and change you. Um, and part of that is like things that are culty that we've known for a while are culty. We talked about Richard Bartle. Richard Bartle invented, who did Mud, invented the Bartle types, which was like a personality test for gamers. What type of gaming do you like? And he did it as an experiment to talk about the way people enjoy games and just as an idea. But Richard Bartle doesn't think that that's going to say something about who you are as a person or who you are even locked in as a gamer. He was like, oh, there's different ways to enjoy games and you can make games for those types of people. But now I see personality tests everywhere, and somehow these are culty things. We don't have a
Yeah.
culture of no, that's really weird that you wanna get me to I mean, calling it followers is weird, you know?
Yep.
It it's there's stuff all around that is like, we could reduce these things that we should have a discussion about what cults do in general. What cults I have all your answers. You're a certain type of person. You can reach higher attainment. The idea that there's better or worse people in the world is one,
Yep.
like, you know, like
And truth and the our want of truth and answers, like you said, it's like everybody wants the answer. Everybody wants the answer, and the older I get, the more you realize, like, the smarter I get on things, the less I know, and it's just that's it. There's not a book, right? And but everybody wants it, and especially the younger you are. I remember myself in my 20s, like, that's what I read content, I talked to people, everything was to try to find the answer, right? Like, find, the force. I need it, right? It wasn't religion for me necessarily at that time, but I need that. So anybody out there handing that out, man, it is definitely a human need to take advantage of, and it's super like, again, I'm really glad that you're out there telling this side of the story, and I think there's so much more that it kinda peels off to than even cults, and something we might not even have a time to touch it today, but something that I would love to get your head on, is cult brands are a big thing. I was a part of a cult brand with Red Bull, right? Like, known as a cult brand, and there was a lot of stuff that was using a word that, is rough like cult, but you do understand whenever somebody says a cult brand. It's a brand that that gets people following it in certain kinds of ways or kind of resonates with somebody's identity more, right? It's something you tattoo on yourself.
so they use that word? That's the
100%.
yeah,
Cult
wow.
brands is a marketing definitely, and it's something to be cherished. And there's also a yearly, a couple of big, large conferences that are really like cult brand conferences, right? And I started getting into that with my own work, and then I was like, "Man, this do we really wanna put that as cult and this together?" But there's something to that idea of cult and an idea and how it spreads, that, uh, I think is interesting with cult brand, and it's interesting that outside of the marketing world isn't as well known, and I would think that that's kind of, interesting with your kind of, response.
Yeah, oh man, we could do a whole interview about that just to enter into it. I mean, especially since my project starts with really wanting to convince people this is a cult, and people push back against us. Not the group obviously always pushes back.
Obviously.
And but which is different with what you're saying, which is interesting. Um, but then people push it out because we don't have any familiarity with cult. We don't know what that means. We don't know that it's not about a methodology. It's about a system of abuse and coercion. It's a
Mm.
system of making you feel dumb for not being a part of it and smart for being a part of it, and a whole bunch of other things that people have now been studying for years. So it goes into this thing that I talk about that goes back to like um, cult education and things like that, and personality tests and life coaches and all these things and nutritionists instead of dietitians, just people that are unlicensed, have no abilities, but kind of want to control you and not really help you. We don't have a language of saying we're sort of like, oh, well, they might be okay. Well, I know them and they're not like those other people. It's like,
Right. There's not like a system of, well, they get a 88% in
yeah,
cultiness, right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like there's no facts are facts. That's it. In the end, facts are facts, and facts can't have up days and down days. And oh, well, there's this exception. Facts are facts. You got to like follow that as a thing. But I'll tell you a story about just to springboard off of what you said about like the searching and then these cult brands and all these different stuff is, you know, everyone says to us that asking questions is a big part of avoiding cults, and that was the answer I gave you before is ask questions. With a cult brand like um like you're saying, um there's no lie to what they're doing. They're selling you a drink in a can. At the end of the day, that drink's gonna come in a can. You're gonna get that can.
mhm.
So when it comes to other stuff and searching, when I was a kid, when I was about 8 years old, I heard about ESP, and I lived in this town in New Jersey. And I said, I want psychic powers to my parents. Take me to the library. I'm going to check out every book about ESP. And we went
Yep.
to many libraries and got all these books. And what I concluded in the end was pretty much at 8 was pretty much no one's telling me how to get psychic powers. No one was giving me an answer in any of these published books on how to get psychic powers. I still kind of wanted to believe that it's out there, but no one is saying like, yeah, you can move stuff with your mind. Obviously, it was because of X-Men, but like no one has said to me,
Obviously.
you can move stuff with your mind. So there was that science to it. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about marketing something, is someone giving you what they said they would give you? So this movie has a cult following. This brand has a cult following. Great. I hope if they use that name so insensitively, they should be doing just as much for real cults and things like that. And everyone should be inspecting if you have cultic things in your life. Are you telling people things in order to just string them along? Are you kind of gaslighting people? Everyone should have that kind of education. But there was an era where these things would get debunked more, and um, we used facts. The famous example I can think of is I just talked about this on Salty Mermaids podcast, and the vegetable lamb and the Kraken in the 1800s, two people set out to be like, look, you can't just talk about animals and the unicorn. You can't just talk about animals if they don't exist. So we're going to try and find them. And if we don't find them, they don't exist. And so someone went out and said, "Is there a vegetable lamb in this area?" Which was a lamb made out of vegetables. And they said, "No, that doesn't exist. It's physiologically impossible in the first place. If we found one, we might have thought it was different. No, there's not a walking vegetable." Then there was with unicorns. Someone said, "I've looked at the biological evolution record, the fossil record. You cannot have a bifooted, biforked toe animal with a single horn. Doesn't exist." And then the Kraken, which was interesting, the Kraken, they were like, "Oh, the Kraken for sure exists. What happens is whalers see whales that have giant squids attached to them." So they said, "We don't have the physiological proof, but we know there's a theoretical possibility of giant squids, and this Kraken of a giant squid that comes and attacks your boat is probably like somewhat real." And lo and behold, there was a giant squid later. Is there evidence of what they're giving you? Because anyone can make up that something's gonna happen. And I think that that's the thing is like a cult brand. Yeah, it's weird and it would be a little bit like saying we're a stalker brand, but we've accepted that as a word that we use like and but they should be doing as much to help that. But at the end of the day, you are getting that extreme sports drink in the bottle, it's coming to you. If working there is horrible, if interacting with this brand is horrible, that's a separate story. Am I being coerced? Am I being influenced? Is a question you can ask at any stakes. If someone is manipulating you into buying a sandwich, if someone's manipulating you into using Q-tips, if someone's really wanting you to join a lifestyle, that's a cultic relationship. Even if it's at the start, that's a cultic relationship building and building and building.
And the thing is you have to have the education because these things are so they're just not in the wheelhouse of anything that it goes against gut, which is always tough for humans, right? It goes against it utilizes those points of manipulation that our brain uses, right? And you even said one like logical fallacies, right? It utilizes those. So you have to really this needs to become part of education further than just, hey, I'm interested in it. This needs to become part of the zeitgeist of, this is the world. We don't have, we don't have enough amazing Randys or people that are out there busting people or debunking, because now we've multiplied it by hundreds, right? Like, so we have to, the only way to arm ourselves against it is probably just arm the whole army, right? Like, to make sure everybody has these understandings to be able to even realize that it's happening to me, right?
A lot of people say stuff like this about advertising, and I always push up against it because, of course, there are legal ramifications if you say something in advertising that isn't true. And most of these groups operate in the world in which they'll tell you it's we're not, you've got all these things that say they're not FDA tested, but then they'll make claims. You know, it's a thing where I actually think advertising has some of this stuff a little bit cornered in a good way, which is to say, like, you can get sued for false advertising. You can get you penalized for false advertising. And so there's a thing there where people always say, like, yeah, everyone's just using you to get you to buy stuff. It's like, well, they're allowed to try and sell you stuff. But when does that become outright manipulation? When does that become outright culticness? When does that become outright coercion? Is something I think that there is, and you hear these stories crop up every year, and I would love to actually, maybe this is what my next project is. We've talked about like where this goes after we do MGTOW, because I'm a journalist, not someone who, I'm not the psychologist that's going to help you. You hear these stories every year about companies, and people go, I felt trapped.
Right.
I felt I couldn't get out. And then you hear about business consultants that are hired for these big companies that are there to just not just coach on working with your team and all those things. Well, what are these people saying to these companies that's getting them to treat their employees this way? You're right. There's an all out education. Am I compelling employees to do things? Am I kind of saying that you need to work harder or else you're not loved? Am I creating this too much like a family that like we're your new family, the workplace family? There's a million questions that I think we can all ask ourselves in everyday life that go beyond marketing is great. You want that. I love the idea of people selling stuff and being passionate about wanting to bring what they do to the world. Coercion is
Correct, and we gotta know the lines. We gotta have the lines in order to know whenever things have been crossed. Both not only on the brand side and the business side, but also on the audience side now too. So that it's a big job. It's a big job because, again, it's way easier to just read the headlines. It's way easier to, have that YouTube video tell you the answers and then not have to go and back that up, because it feels good already. It already feels right. So it's a lot of work ahead for all of us, I think.
and quite frankly, I think there's so much low-hanging fruit that we haven't done this at all. There's so much low-hanging fruit where it's the person who you read about in the headlines, that takes an expert like Rick Ross. That takes someone like Rachel Bernstein. I am never gonna do anything about that. But coming on this show and saying, "Hey, are you marketing or are you compelling people?
Yes.
Hey, is your company fun or is it a little bit too much like a religion? Like, I think hey, is this friend of yours just have weird opinions and they can talk on the internet, or is there something wrong with them? Those questions that we can ask ourselves, and we don't need to worry about like reaching out to our friends and saying like I'm worried about you, because you're not going to help.
Yeah.
You and I, we're not going to help the people who are getting on the spaceship behind the comet.
Yep.
They are getting on that spaceship unless there's an expert there who knows how to, like I say about mental health, you play with live ammo at a certain level. You play with, and that's not a metaphor. You play with live ammo with certain mental health conditions, and you're dealing with people's lives, people that can really ruin their life in one afternoon having an
And
episode.
I think you said something really important earlier too that I'll put out, is to say that you have to get in front of people before they get on the on ramp, right? You have to somehow get them back on course then, because it's too late. Once you're highly aware of it and they're already into that, no matter what it is, it's too late, right? Like,
and you're gonna react.
Yeah.
You know, like the idea that then you have this person in this crisis that you then notice when it's really bad. I won't do anything until it's really bad. Oh, I'm not some paragon. I live with someone with a mental health condition. I have OCD. You think that I'm not in days, frustrated and upset? No, because you're not a psychologist. Even if you are, it's personal. Like Richard Bartle says, it's, you're dealing with real people, and you're going to get affected on a real level. It's not a virtual world, and it's like if you don't start to say something when your friend is like, hey, is this really about this thing? You know, how many the point I also made to someone was how many apologies do you hear that are like, "Yeah, I was in a bad place, I didn't mean to say that, and I was whatever." That's every apology, and yet then when someone does something gross or evil, we're like, "It's because 'cause they're evil."
Oh,
It's because
man, I mean, you're 100% right. It's really easy for us as a species to say, "Hey," because another thing in business, that I always rap on is like, "Hey, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. In fact, you should make tons of mistakes," but then if you look inside the actual professional realm, there's there's no such thing, and God forbid you make a mistake on social media or somebody says something because they didn't know enough about it or whatever it is before they are like you're completely dismantled, so there is this on it, I get it.
hypocritical.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand that, you've doubled the chance for me to agree with you, but like this hypocrisy of us being very caring about people's well-being, but then not understanding that a lot of that hate on the internet is from a mental health issue, and not seeing those the same thing is a very intriguing big idea. And I'm glad that you're tackling that, and I'm also glad that you're going to be doing other things because, like you said, you're like, my world's not going to revolve from this point on. I'm an artist. I'm going to move on at some point.
You can't, and that's why, like, companies make new ads. It's why people do new stuff. It's why because when you start to at the heart of all of this is an identity crisis.
Yes.
Don't define yourself. Don't. I put out this tweet that was like, um, maybe I'll find it and send it to you. It was like, there are people who define themselves by the books they read and the bands they're a fan of, and that's not who you are. And someone replied, be like, "Oh, that's who everyone is." And I was like, I respect that you say that, but I don't really believe that. As soon as you start to, and this is my pushback against we're this brand. Well, like, Clorox and all these companies used to sponsor sketch shows on TV. And like, if you stay with who you are, if you have this rigid definition of who you are, you or rather if you live in life thinking you're going to figure out like this is what defines me, you're going to keep getting in situations where what defines you is the cult, what defines you is this idea, what defines you is this money sucking
Yeah,
scam,
the
what defines
only answer you'll find is not good ones, right? Because
right.
those are the places that are like, "Cool, we got all the answers, and you can have them for $10,000 in a couple of weeks in the desert."
I've actually wanted to get this on audio for a while now, this point of this, which is like, I could totally, like, there are people with less credentials than me, I could totally just say, well, now I'm a cult expert. I'm a cult expert. Have me on your thing because I did this one investigation. There is with 100% a market to do that. But in researching cults and in knowing about life, you wouldn't want to be that person. And that's why it's not important that I move on because I want to have a varied career.
Mhm.
If I thought that staying with this would fix this problem and staying in this forever would help people, I would, but it's more that I think that's ungenuine to the problem at hand. There's people doing it that are the expert. I was on Rachel Bernstein's podcast. You can look it up, No Laughing Matter, and we were making fun of the idea of me being an expert. You know, there's a person out there right now who's done one thing and is saying, "Oh yeah, I'm the expert. Here I come." It's like, no, I'm not. I I am very much not that person.
Mike, it is we could double or triple this time, man. I could talk to you forever on this because I think that it all makes sense. It all kind of flows into messages that are received on the internet, how we kind of evolve our brains in internet culture, right? And like it's happened so incredibly fast, and it's never going to slow down again, right? Like so, this idea of catching up, this idea, I really dig the messages of stop worrying about catching up. And stop worrying about identity so much. It is a drawing factor for humans, but stop worrying about the what defines you so much as it is to like just making stuff and figuring it out as we all go. I love that as a human being and as a marketer and as a creator too. So really appreciate that. Where can people find you on the interwebs, and also like the pieces that we talked about today? Where can they find more info on that?
Everything's on Rizzle. I'm on the front page of Rizzle. So if you download the Rizzle app, Rizzle, you go to the search bar, you'll find us in the scroll on top, our series on MGTOW. I'm Rizzle user morning. You can search like morning, like the time of day. Hashtag cult.org is where everything that we have that we've done with this, that has raw interviews, which again, like to quickly touch on it, I know we could talk forever. I put those raw interviews up being like, well, that's not going to connect with people. We get more messages about these raw, uncut, unedited things that they tell you not to do in film school. Don't release
Ah,
uncut,
you
unfinished
just
footage.
tossed them up, like, just, "Hey, here is everything, warts and all."
Almost every week, someone says, I watched that whole 2 hour thing. I watched that whole 3 hour thing. This person in my, so you can watch those really, really long videos there that will get you sucked in, or you can watch the 1 minute stuff on Rizzle. Everything's on hashtag cult.org. Reach out. We have a rolling process here. I would love if someone heard this and they're like, "Yep, this happened to me. I want to be on camera." We've had more anonymous interviews on this than I've seen on things about crime. So, violent crimes and money stealing crimes. So, if you want to be anonymous, join the ranks because cults are scary, and I understand that it's scary to feel like you can put yourself out there in a cultic situation. But that's hashtag cult.org and rizzle.tv/user/you/morning, or you can just download the Rizzle app. You'll find me. You'll find me there.
Cool, well,
And
we'll for sure have those in the show notes, of course, because everybody uses show notes, so, that is the answer to everything. Ha It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much
it's been
for your
so much fun.
time today. I'm looking forward to, catching what's next and seeing what's on the future for not just hashtag cult, but for you in general. It's a pleasure to talk with you and hope to have you again, on again sometime to talk about. I mean, we didn't even get into this idea of, I'm gonna send you some links too, of brand's personality, right? Like the idea, it's very easy, has been very easy for people to accept a brand or a
Oh, I love
corporation
this.
as Tony the Tiger or a thing on Twitter, right? And so breaking those things down are really is, I think, an interesting conversation.
Yeah,
I'd
we
love
got
to.
to do that. That's oh yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I love that. Let's tease it.
Yeah, right, right. Like, yeah,
I'll be
halfway
back.
through, I was like, "Man, that could be a fit." But thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for everybody for joining us on another pop marketing podcast. This is Joe. That was Mike. Later on, gang.
I'm